So I want to talk about this Mahmoud Khalil situation that's going on. I'm not going to talk about the situation and the kind of information about it. I've made a short about it. I'll link it somewhere in here and in the description. But I want to talk about the politics of it, because the politics of it doesn't... It makes sense, but it's terrible that it makes sense. And not making sense in the way that it's right, sense in the way that it makes sense because of how the United States operates. So, the United States has two right-wing parties, and let's be honest, when it comes to the Democrats, they don't need much convincing to become just like racist and support colonialism, because they're just neoliberals, and neoliberalism and capitalism uses and loves using racism. For the Republicans, they are the same. They also love racism. They also love neoliberalism and capitalism. But the thing is, many Republican voters, not the politicians, but many Republican voters have been unfortunately indoctrinated to dislike foreign nations. But for somehow, the Republican Party in particular has managed to convince their base that, you know, giving money specifically to the Zionist colony is okay, whereas all the other ones are incorrect. So, like, let me talk to Republicans here. If you are a Republican, you should oppose the state of Israel because financially it is propped up by the United States. And the ROI isn't super great, and you've seen that over the past 2 to 3 years. The ROI on the United States, you know, funding the state of Israel isn't really great, and it's like becoming diminishing returns. So if you're a Republican, genuinely, I think you should try and, you know, change your party for the quote unquote better. But so clearly the politics of that doesn't make sense. Obviously, the personal financial interests of the politicians, both Democratic and Republican, is why the US, you know, props up its colony of Israel. Because, and I'll establish this here, Israel doesn't control the United States controls Israel. And it's very unfortunate that many people think that it's Israel that has all the influence over the United States, when it's the United States who controls and has the influence over Israel. And it is rich people in the United States, particularly politicians and lobbying groups, and again, the largest lobbying group in, for Israel is the Christian Zionist Lobbyist Group. I think as of the last time I checked, they're the largest donors. And frankly, these people only support anti-Palestinian policies, only support pro-Israeli policies because they personally are going to be enriched from it. People from the United States, their tax money is being sent to Israel, and then the politicians who have, you know, maybe stocks in Israeli companies, who maybe are on the board of Israeli companies, they're the ones getting the money out of it. It's kind of like laundering. The money from the US taxpayers goes to Israel, and that goes back into the pockets of politicians, both Democrat and Republican. So this Mahmoud Khalil thing, I think purely is to ensure that that money keeps flowing. Donald Trump going so hard on trying to, you know, get Khalil thrown in prison, trying to get Mahmoud Khalil, deported. It's so that flow of money still keeps going. Because I'm sure the politicians aren't the ones necessarily dictating who and where the money gets allocated. The lobbying groups do. And the lobbying groups are kind of a separate piece of fraud. The lobbying groups, again, they will get the money from Americans, send it to Israel, and that comes back to the lobbying groups to lobby the politicians. There's like 2 cycles of fraud going on here. Again, like I said, predominantly Christians doing this, so this isn't like that the conspiracies that I unfortunately see of Jewish people controlling the world, like, that's not how this is working. It is just capitalists doing this, and many of those capitalists just seem to be Christian. Evangelical Christian, to be honest. I think when it comes to the United States, you should you should point that out, because the United States has many more factions of sects of Christianity than, say, here in the UK, where mostly we would say you're Protestant or Catholic, and you'd have maybe a few Baptists there. But in the US, it is almost complete, like, the ones funding this are the evangelicals. So just this whole situation, I mean, he even worked with the UK. So, I mean, Starmer's not going to say anything. He's a cuck. The fact that we're seeing these big protests about it, and we're even seeing, like, the international community turning on the US over this, it's just diminishing returns to keep doing this. And I know the politicians are going to be lining their pockets. I'm sure Trump is getting money from these the lobbying groups, the pro-Israeli Zionist lobbying groups. I'm sure Matt Gaetz, what's his name? His name's not Matt Gaetz, is it? Who's the guy who's the US Vice President? J.D. Vance. Who's Matt Gaetz? He's another one, isn't he? He's another US politician. I think he's the one that was doing sus things. But yeah, it just, truly, it does not logically make sense. But capitalism isn't logical. Capitalism is all about ensuring wealth is transferred to the rich. And, scapegoating Mahmoud is just a way to ensure that transfer of money continues going. It is the Republican Party, or specifically the Trump White House's way of ensuring, hey, we're going to make a big deal out of nothing. This is a nothing burger. We're going to make such a big deal out of it to ensure that we support the Israeli project, and so then the colony in Israel will be confident that money will keep flowing, and then the money flows back. It's all just, it's a Ponzi scheme. Genuinely, the state of Israel is a Ponzi scheme for the United States at this point. Politicians will invest in Israeli companies, they'll invest in Israeli stocks. That value goes up the more the United States supports Israel in all of its activities, or at least, ensures Israel is successful. It's kind of like the British Raj, where people who had stocks in the British East India Company were ensuring that, trade to India and the locals were used for slave labor in India to ensure that their investments increased. That's what US politicians do, with the lobbyist groups, the lobbying groups, get money from Americans who have been indoctrinated into thinking, oh yeah, the rapture will happen if we get rid of all the Jewish people, and then, I don't know, and then that money goes to Israel, and that money is then given back to lobbyists, and then the lobbyists give the money to the politicians. It's just a Ponzi scheme for the United States, essentially. Obviously, that's a very simplified version of what's going on here, but what to do? Hey, keep up the activism. It's awesome seeing, this is a older article, I think it's on the 12th, and I don't see any of the ones. I don't know, the BBC is very sus when it comes to, like, linking to actually relevant articles, like follow-ups, especially when it's about Palestine. But we saw big protests in London today, and we also saw a Jewish campaign sit-in at Trump Tower. I think 100 people at least were arrested, or at least detained. So keep up the fight, keep up the work. Hey, if you're in the UK and you can make it to London this weekend, Saturday, I think probably the day this video is going out, I think, actually, so it might be a bit late, but this goes out early morning. If you are in London and you're deciding to go at the very last minute, go to the National March today, the 15th of March, I believe. March. Go to that, go show your support. They're always really good to go to. There's very good speakers all the time. I will try and make it there. I'm not 100% sure if I can, but I will be trying to make it there as well. So, but also try and do some local activism as well, even just in like your friend groups. That's a great place for you to start. But yeah, it is an appalling situation, and again, just a situation that just doesn't need to be happening.